Good morning. This morning's keynote speaker is Clifton Leaf, a prominent healthcare journalist and the editor-in-chief of Fortune magazine. In 2013, Mr. Leaf authored a book hailed by Newsweek as one of the best books about cancer, entitled The Truth in Small Doses: Why We're Losing the War on Cancer and How to Win It. He has received numerous awards in his efforts against cancer, including the Gerald Loeb Award for Distinguished Business and Financial Journalism, the National Institute for Healthcare Management's Healthcare Journalism Award, and a Lifetime Achievement Award for Cancer Reporting from the European School of Oncology. In 2006, he also was the first and only journalist to receive the honor of delivering grand rounds at the National Cancer Institute in Bethesda, Maryland. We are thrilled to have him with us today. Please welcome Clifton Leaf.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be talking with all of you today. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard, because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills, because that challenge is one that we are willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone. These famous words of President John F. Kennedy, delivered in September 1962 at Rice University and borrowed countless times since then, are the ones that I think of when I attend a conference like this. Whenever women and men of science gather to share visions of how to turn the improbable into the achievable. Whenever anyone talks about conquering new worlds, about finding scientific holy grails, whenever anyone talks about moonshots. In recent months, I have read about proposals for Operation Moonshot, a UK government plan to screen millions of people each week for COVID, for a dementia moonshot to cure Alzheimer's, for moonshots to close the digital divide, fight global inequities, eradicate HIV, and stem climate change. And of course, there have been many announced moonshots to cure cancer over the years. So many that one moonshot launcher once sued another over trademark infringement. But for anyone who has dreams of going to the moon, whether on a rocket powered by focused ultrasound or by some disease-snuffing monoclonal antibody, I hope I might share with you a glimpse of what it would truly take to achieve that goal. You can see it here on Merritt Island, Florida. There's a narrow 3.5-mile-long road down there on a marshy slit off the Atlantic Ocean that's worth seeing up close. This 130-foot wide track at the Kennedy Space Center, called the Crawlerway, doesn't get much notice, but it's an engineering marvel nestled within the original moonshot, the one that carried men to the moon in 1969. Several private construction firms working with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers spent some 30 months in the early 1960s dredging up an island's worth of sand and silt, pumping in 2.3 million cubic meters of fill, compacting with intense pressure, then covering it with layers of rounded gravel known as Alabama River rock. By the time the Crawlerway was completed in February 1966, it could sustain a load of 18.5 million pounds, or an extraordinary 12,000 pounds per square foot of track. Enough, that is, to withstand the weight of any one of the Saturn or Apollo spacecraft, plus their respective mobile launchers, as well as the monumentally sized crawler transporter that hauled them inch by inch from the Moonport's vehicle assembly building to the launch pad. Fortune wrote about the project in 1966, and this slide is an image from that story. Designing a road may seem like the least sexy part of what is considered one of the most wondrous feats of engineering in human history. It required no whiz-bang electronics, no chemical wizardry or sophisticated aeronautic science, no mastery of gravity, breakthrough in telemetry, or theoretical map-making in a never-before-seen terrain. What makes the construction of the Crawlerway so remarkable, however, is the sheer idea of the thing. It was somebody's job to know it would be needed, to figure out how to build it, and to make sure it got done. Here's an aerial view, courtesy of NASA, showing the early construction of Launch Pad 39A. This was unglamorous, if not quite ordinary road building. And it's the stuff that real moonshots are made of, as historians Charles D. Benson and William Barnaby Faraday have marvelously chronicled in an online archive for NASA, which I urge all of you to read. Many research scientists, physicians, inventors, and advocates will advise that what we need most in the fight against COVID or cancer or Alzheimer's is more research funding. And additional funding would help for sure, absolutely without question. But even more than that, we need roads. And we need to connect those pathways into networks. We need to establish, for instance, common byways for bioinformatics, communication tools and systems that enable the petabytes of raw biological data pumped out by medical sciences each year to be classified and organized in a way that can be understood and, yes, accessed by researchers everywhere. Now, we now have a Tower of Babel of systems and terminology where technological platforms don't communicate with one another and where technical standards aren't standardized at all. As an editorial writer in The Lancet put it, interoperability is a common sense idea that has proven uncommonly hard to put into practice in the world of medicine. Interoperability, as the National Academy of Medicine defines it, means the ability to share, abstract, or link data from electronic health records, medical equipment, registries, lab results, records from prescriptions, as well as claims records, even wearable and mobile devices. Such a seamless and instant interconnectivity of data could allow us to see things in real time that might take many months or years to reveal in a clinical study. It would allow for a truly fast exchange of information and knowledge, facilitating everything from telemedicine to faster drug approvals and device approvals, from recognizing adverse events and foodborne outbreaks quickly, to identifying burgeoning pockets of an emerging infectious disease before it spreads too far. What makes this possible, though, isn't in most cases fancy new technology. Rather, it's agreement. That's right, an agreement to drive on the same road and follow the same road rules. This is what makes the internet possible, for example. The Transmission Control Protocol, TCP, and the Internet Protocol, IP, are the foundational rules that let each of us Google our ways to digital enlightenment today. They are the rules of the road, specifying how data sent between one computer and another should be formatted, addressed, layered, transmitted, routed, and received. This is a conceptual reading of the first Internet Protocol Suite, TCP/IP, in 1982 from its co-engineers, Robert E. Kahn and Vince Cerf at the Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA. Vint is on the left there. Both men are often called the fathers of the internet as a result of this standard. The US Department of Defense began incorporating these protocols into its ARPANET in 1973, and by 1982, the Defense Department made it mandatory for military computers to use TCP/IP for all host-to-host connections. Here's the road under construction, you can see. Soon afterwards, developers incorporated the TCP/IP stack into their own adaptations of the Unix operating system. Then came IBM and Microsoft, which incorporated the protocols into their operating systems. And like that, the convention was set in stone. The internet would run on TCP/IP. It would be global. It would usher in an age of commerce and connectivity unlike any the world had ever seen. It is, again, agreement on where and how to connect that turns a road into a viable network of highways. And amazingly, we can build those highways in the sky. This gift, courtesy of data visualization company Metrocosm and the World Economic Forum, condenses 24 hours of global air traffic in the span of 4 seconds. Each glimmer of yellow light represents one commercial flight during that single day, based on the data from the Flight Stats website. And this is all made possible because of roads and traffic cops, in this case, the global system of air traffic controllers. Why do I show you all of these byways, highways, and networks, you might wonder? Because the lack of agreement, the failure to standardize, is one reason we have failed to build the kind of roads we need in biomedicine and in healthcare more broadly. A report by the National Academy of Medicine, released in October of 2018, illustrates this point in great detail with respect to our disconnected hodgepodge of electronic health record systems. The lack of a common framework extends from data syntax, the standards for organizing the data within messages being exchanged, to semantics, that is to say, agreement over using the same terminology for the same things. To cite just one example, the American Society of Clinical Oncology and the College of American Pathologists found that as many as 1/5 of current tests for estrogen and progesterone worldwide may be inaccurate because of variation in thresholds for positivity, interpretation criteria, and other varying standards. As Fortune's Erica Fry and journalist Fred Schulte at Kaiser Health News argued last year in an extraordinary Fortune investigation, critical patient information is often lost in the deluge of our voluminous EHR data. Indeed, I urge all of you to read the article entitled Death by 1,000 Clicks, which I'm proud to say has helped change the national conversation about the roles of electronic health records in medicine today and how we can improve them. The accumulating cost of our failures in integrating EHRs, of our failure to create free-flowing highways of information rather than constant traffic jams, isn't just felt by patients, but also by those who provide that care, by physicians and nurses. We need other roads too, ones, for instance, that connect patients with appropriate clinical trials. Currently, fewer than 5%, and perhaps as few as 3%, depending on the estimate, of cancer patients, an area that I've been writing about for some time, enroll in such studies, a huge share of which end up being never completed due to a lack of patients signing up. One blue ribbon study after another has bemoaned the failure of our system of clinical trials to produce meaningful, timely answers to critical medical questions. I won't spend much time on their shortcomings today, but one thing we could fix with the right roads in place is to improve the way we prioritize clinical trials and connect patients to them. An astounding 40% of NCI-sponsored phase 3 clinical trials take so long to get going that they are never completed, the Institute of Medicine had found, leaving the treatment questions that launched these vast human experiments unanswered, and the patients who bravely volunteered for them in limbo. As John Mendelsohn, the longtime head of the MD Anderson Cancer Center, who sadly passed away some years ago, said, "It is a terrible waste of human and financial resources." Christian Stenslin and colleagues went so far a few years back to call this failure an epidemic. I'm guessing this headline probably felt more appropriate in 2014 than it does today in the age of COVID. But I think it's worth pointing out that this is a colossal challenge that has not gone away, as a simple PubMed search will show you. And the challenge, it should be said, goes well beyond the cancer realm. We need roads for collecting, curating, and sharing biospecimens, the human tissue that holds the molecular secrets of human health and disease. And we need to build pathways for talented young scientists to pursue fresh ideas and begin independent research careers. As it is now, too many of the best and brightest postdoctoral students are abandoning biomedical science altogether due to both a lack of funding and a sense that there is little opportunity to conduct independent research. In 1980, more than 40% of the research project grants issued by the NIH across the board went to investigators under the age of 40. Today, that figure is about 10%. All of this work is about creating connections, about making it easier to share data and tools and ideas. And all of it has to be built and managed in some way by somebody, like our crawler way in the Apollo program. If we're really serious about our medical moonshots, then we have to get out the paving machine. Winning the fight against cancer or Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or COVID-19 is not just a long road, it's several of them. Which brings me back to that original moonshot. When we think of the race to the moon, we think of Apollo, the mission that landed Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin onto the gray dust of the Sea of Tranquility. But long before Apollo was Ranger, which I wrote about in my book, The Truth in Small Doses. And there's a shameless plug for my book on this slide, which I'm going to keep up for a while. The idea of the Ranger mission, the initial phase of the space program, was straightforward in principle: to hurl a box of electronic sensors and cameras onto the moon before attempting to do the same with a human being. Implicit in the mission was that it would teach NASA a few lessons about getting there too. The spacecraft was less a vehicle than a slender cone on a 6-sided base 5 feet across, stuffed with a dozen sensing gadgets. There was a solar plasma detector and a device for measuring magnetic waves, a primitive-looking chamber that could detect ion discharges in space, another for cosmic rays. Underneath the skinny module was a bomb, a 5-story, 2-stage rocket with 360,000 pounds of thrust. It was an actual bomb. In fact, it was an ICBM, a ballistic missile whose original mission had been to carry nuclear warheads to other continents. Now it was being used to catapult a 700-pound sliver into space. The first Ranger rocket shot upward at dawn on August 22nd, 1961, but things quickly went wrong. Due to a faulty switch, the upper stage fizzled way too soon, leaving Ranger 1 far from its target. The high point of its very elliptical orbit was supposed to have been 620,000 miles above the Earth. Ranger 1 got only to mile marker 313 before sliding back into the planet's atmosphere and frying to a crisp. The launch of Ranger 2 3 months later was worse. The second stage of the rocket misfired, leaving the spacecraft in an even lower, more precarious orbit. 2 months later went Ranger 3. This time, a single inverted sign in a line of computer code caused havoc, sending the craft in precisely the opposite direction of its intended flight path. 2 days into the mission, the computer failed. Ranger 4 had a little bit of luck, managing to crash land on the far side of the moon, but the spacecraft could provide little data regarding any of the mission to mission control. Almost immediately after separating from its rocket, the module's onboard computer crashed. So did the internal clock, which allowed preordained commands to run in a choreographed sequence. The craft had become, as one NASA official put it, an idiot with a radio signal. Ranger 5 followed in October of 1962. Little more than an hour passed before the calamities began. Yet another faulty switch robbed the craft's solar panels of electrical power. Then the battery drained, then the computer overheated, then more shorting. Then the radio transmitter went dead. The gyroscope that kept the spacecraft in relative balance malfunctioned along with the rest, throwing the vehicle into a wild somersault and far off course. Adding to the frustrations were more failures at a pair of tracking stations on Earth. Machines that were supposed to radio telemetry data to the spacecraft simply stopped working. There could be little doubt about what was responsible for the Ranger fiasco. 3 official investigations, one from NASA, one from Congress, and one from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, home of the brainy rocketeers who had pioneered many of the telemetry and guidance systems for the Army's missile arsenal and who now ran Ranger, all came to the same damning conclusions. The problem was Slat Management. Even the review board from JPL was shocked by the glaring weaknesses in their own oversight. JPL had organized Ranger personnel into 100 subgroups, each focusing on a discrete task. Without any sense of common goal, workers, and I'm quoting here from one of the reports, showed a surprising lack of information or interest about the impact their item might have on any adjacent circuit or switch, or on the performance of the craft in general. Project leaders had not the faintest understanding of systems engineering, of the need to coordinate individual engineering tasks into a simple, single, complex effort. Investigators were shocked at this. And when machines and procedures did fail in testing, there was no process beyond water cooler chatter to let managers and colleagues know, nor any standard follow-up procedure to ensure that the flaws were corrected and that the corrections did not in turn adversely affect other systems. Everything in the tiny craft was connected in one way or another, but no one was charged with the task of building the roads that connected one group to another, one system to another. The Ranger program was supposed to consist of 9 missions. NASA investigators, however, were convinced that flights 6 through 9 would fare no better than the first 5. The space agency threatened to withhold any new projects from JPL until it reformulated its management systems. The threat of a funding cut worked. As later flights would bear out, the laboratory's leadership did turn things around. New engineering processes and oversight were put in place, and such strategies would be employed to near perfection in the later manned space mission, as Stephen B. Johnson, a professor of space studies at the University of North Dakota, wrote about in a wonderful 2002 book on the subject, which I urge all of you to read. Systems management, he argues, systems management was the real secret behind Apollo's success. Just after the moonshot's triumph in 1969, writer Tom Alexander would wonderfully distill the lessons in a piece for Fortune magazine. The really significant fallout from the strains, traumas, and endless experimentation of Project Apollo has been of a sociological rather than a technological nature, he wrote. It was the discovery of techniques for directing the mass scores of thousands in a mutually enhancing combination of government, university, and private industry. To make real progress, even the engineering wizards of the space program needed to be connected by old-fashioned roads. Good luck with day 4 of this important symposium, and I hope when all of this is done, you'll start paving a new road together. Thank you.